Well, good morning, and I'm really delighted this morning to be joined by Lorna Nicol from Metro Bank. And Lorna, we've known each other for now around 18 months, I think you said the other day. How time flies.
I know, it might be longer than that actually.
Might be. And I know
Yeah.
we've sat in my kitchen at points having conversations.
Yeah, I think it probably is pushing 2 years. Yeah, it's just been a long 2 years with what's happened in the world.
And I think the thing that drew us together is our kind of mutual interest in people's well-being, but from very different angles. So I do lots of stuff, as you know, around emotional well-being, sort of mental fitness for work, and that kind of thing. And you've had a real passion around financial well-being, and the two of them go so well together because one thing I've noticed from all the companies that I go into is that actually finance is one of those massive areas that affects everyone, and it's one of those things that's kind of almost behind closed doors, isn't it? People aren't very open and transparent and honest about their financial worries. And I think that's where I've always really liked your approach. And I know when we first met, your role's very different now, but when we first met, you did quite a lot of stuff around financial well-being, kind of clinics and supporting employees and business around well-being. And then last year, you took the plunge and you changed your role to something, well, I guess it feels quite different. Tell us a little bit about what your role looks like and how that change happened and how, what the pandemic, sort of how that affected that.
Yeah, so as you say, I'd been running my own business as a wealth manager, which really pulled on sort of 40 years of working in financial services. I had the opportunity in July last year to join Metro Bank. So I now work for Metro Bank as local director based in Aylesbury. Essentially, my role as local director is to be the face of Metro Bank in the local community. Metro Bank is an up-and-coming bank. It's only been in the UK for 10 years. It's been the first bank in the last 100 years to get a banking license. We're, in normal times open 7 days a week. We're normally open 8 till 8, Monday to Friday. So very different in terms of how Metro Bank works from most of the other high street banks. But as local director, my job is really just to hopefully, grow the presence of Metro Bank, work with individual and support personal banking, and also support businesses right from startups through to, many million turnover businesses. And I think the brand and the values of Metro Bank very much match how I like to work, and that's what really drew them to me. Circumstances with COVID just sort of meant that actually I just paused, I think sort of spring last year, and just took a view of actually what do I want the next 10 years of my working life to look like, and actually some of the risks with the way my business would have potentially been going on a self-employed basis, and I was sort of looking to expand and grow, just probably weren't the right steps at that point in time. Coming to Metro Bank does very much feel like coming home. I've got, a brilliant store manager that I work with who supports 3 assistant store managers, and then a team of about 12, 14 staff colleagues below him, and then two business managers. So a really nice team in Aylesbury. And actually, I'm really enjoying getting to know a lot of the businesses around Buckinghamshire much more. I live just inside Oxfordshire, so sitting in Bicester at the moment. But the catchment area for us in Aylesbury really does take in Buckinghamshire and some of Oxfordshire as well. So, and Metro Bank is very much about inclusivity in terms of actually we will open bank accounts for people that maybe struggle to get bank accounts. And so a lot of the things that maybe I've felt passionate about in the past around the impact of people being disenfranchised because they can't get a bank account, or actually not having somebody that they can sit down and speak to. A lot of the things that are available in Metro Bank, you don't need to make an appointment to come and see someone in Metro Bank. We have a no appointment policy. So actually all of the things that you want to make it easy to get access to a bank and access to finance, without it sounding like a sales pitch, because it's not meant to be, but obviously it was a considered view for me when I had the opportunity to join Metro Bank. So so been there since July. Keep having to remind people that I work alongside. I have only been here 6 months when I'm saying, oh, where do I find that form and what button do I press?
Deep end. I think it's really interesting what you're saying about it almost feels like you've come home, because Metro Bank has such a good reputation, and it feels, from what I've heard and my experience of it, is very much like it is about community, and I think that makes it stand out. And I think the reputation speaks volumes. I do a lot of work around leadership and creating workplace culture where employees are happy to be working in the organisation. Clients are happy to engage with them. Everyone feels good. And actually your reputation that kind of comes from that, and word spreads very, very fast. And I think Metro Bank's always been one of those places that has always stood out as being slightly different to the other banks, but not necessarily quite knowing how to put your finger on it. So it's
as you're saying that, I'm just sat looking at your bookshelf behind you, and I've got a bookshelf just over here.
Yeah.
I think I've got it here actually. This wasn't staged. It's just making me think. Actually, Metro Bank talks about creating fans. Actually, it is all about reputation, and it sounds very American and so on, but do you know what, it really does work. They are hopefully building that reputation. We're all human, we don't get things right 100% of the time, but actually we aim to. And we want to make doing business with us as easy as possible, and things as transparent as possible. And the thing that I've experienced within Metro Bank, and I've worked for a number of other organizations through my life. I won't go into that. I'm not trying to be derogatory about other financial institutions, but the bit that I've noticed that's different within Metro Bank is actually the message at the top doesn't change as you come through. I've worked in lots of organizations where the vision at the top is absolutely right, but then somehow within that middle top tier of management, where people are so passionate about putting their stamp on things, that actually that desire and that behavioral thing that actually should be a cultural thing through the business gets lost. And that really doesn't happen in Metro Bank. I've got a red jacket on today. Red is Metro Bank's color. We always wear red on Fridays and call Fridays Magic Fridays. You'll go on a call and people say, hi, happy Magic Friday. Some people, it might not be their thing, and actually they're probably not the right fit for Metro Bank. But actually, when customers come in and it's their birthday on a Friday, we'll go out and buy them flowers or cakes or just things that actually just make the world a nicer place.
And I love the fact there's such a conscious culture. There's such a conscious approach to this is how we do it, and if you don't like it, probably it's not the best fit for you. Because I think actually having that confidence to say this is how we do it, and this is what our message is, and the message is being delivered from the top. And your observation about kind of falling down a lot of companies around the management.
Well, you see a lot of that, I imagine.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the number of companies who, the leadership team have this kind of amazing vision, and then it completely falls down because either the managers aren't part of that. Or they don't know how to, they don't have the confidence or the skills or the knowledge. And that's why I'm ending up spending quite a lot of time talking to people about actually how do we get this to be kind of an organization-wide vision that everyone's buying into and everyone knows how to achieve their part of that.
I think Metro Bank does very much believe in getting people to live and breathe that culture and that those behaviors. Even they don't get it very wrong, I don't think, but actually they do recruit the right people, and you can easily tell whether people are the right people. But actually, even with interviews, their interviews are called auditions, and that tells you everything. When you actually step out in front of the public, you are on stage, and you need to be at your best, and you need to look after the people that we're there to serve, because otherwise they won't come back.
So normally you'd be doing kind of talks to larger, so big organizations, big companies, and talking to lots of MDs and so on, but I know you have a real passion about financial wellbeing. How did your interest in that come about?
I think there's been a few things actually. I started working in Williams and Glyn's Bank back as a young 16-year-old, many moons ago, 40 odd years ago. And there's been a few things through my personal working life that have probably influenced some of my understanding around that. And I think I came back to it actually when I stepped into the self-employed mold. I don't think I've shared this story with you actually, but when I was a young working mum, we had a young nanny that came to the house and looked after the children. They weren't sort of childcare arrangements that there are these days that you can get. And her father died from a heart attack playing football, and he was 45, something like that. And her mother had a young 2-year-old and was then faced, she didn't work, she was faced with a mortgage where she had no life cover. They thought they had life cover. So there was the risk of them losing the house and all sorts of things. Actually, as it turned out, they did manage to sort of sort it out because the bank had made some errors, and actually there should have been some life cover in place. But I've seen things like that. I've seen people where somebody's not kept up with loan payments, or they've hidden things from spouses or divorces, and actually the things that happen sadly in normal life, when you sit in a financial institution the length of time that I have, and you see people coming in and actually needing help because they're going to lose the roof over their head through no fault of their own. They've lost their job, or their husband or wife's walked out on them, or there's been ill health, or people just didn't understand that they weren't putting enough money away. They've got a pension pot with 20,000 and they think they're going to be okay when they come to retirement. And I think when I stepped into self-employment sort of 4 years ago, I spent a lot of time, as you do, going out to network meetings and trying to introduce people. And there were a lot of people that were talking about mindfulness and well-being and so on. And it really started to resonate with me that none of these people ever touched on the impact on people's lives, that either when you have ill health or mental wellness is not right, that people bury their heads in the sand, and actually that quite often has a knock-on effect to people's finances. You could have the stereotypical TV drama where the doorsteps got piles of envelopes unopened on the inside map, but actually there are people that have that. They'll pick it up and put it in a pile behind the bread bin, and they'll have months and months of unopened statements or bills that they haven't paid, and the idea of it actually makes them feel even worse. And then you've got that vicious circle. And then you've got the other side of it where something's happened in life, circumstances have changed, or people have just not actually had the education around around looking after their money. My kids used to go down to the building society with their dad on a Saturday morning and pay a few pence in with their passbook, and then they'd have a few pounds to spend every week, and they'd decide what to do with their with their savings money. And I think it's not so easy just to go into building societies or banks in the way that people used to when my kids were younger. But I think even our grandmothers used to have the jam jars on a shelf, and they'd put a bit in for Christmas and a bit in for birthdays and a bit in for this and a bit in for that, and I'll still talk to people when I'm talking about their personal finances, especially youngsters, and how they need to just sort of plan around, well, you can open a separate savings account, if you like to go to all of these festivals in the summer and you spend all the money in the summer, put some money away every month throughout the winter, rather than actually finding you're needing to put it all onto a credit card in the summer. So some of the old habits have sort of been lost. And I think people, it's really easy when you've got a plastic card, it's not real money, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
You can lose track.
There's kind of old habits, and there's how things were done in kind of the good old days, and things are very different now, and it's almost like there is that gap, isn't there? And it's there's that kind of question about whose job is it to fill that gap in terms of helping people understand money, and if they're worried about it, what to do about it, and how to go about kind of resolving that. And I think it's such a real issue, which is why I'm really keen to help kind of companies start to think more about the need to look at financial well-being. Because if we continue to just put our heads in the sand at an individual level, think about how many people, in terms of going into their workplace or working remotely or whatever they're doing at the moment, who are affected by that worry, that sense of worry about the housing, being able to pay the mortgage, being able to pay their bills, whatever it looks like. That sense of worry will impact on their ability to be able to focus on their job. And I think it's too easy for workplaces, for employers to say, it's not our issue, that's to do with their stuff outside. And you think actually the cost of presenteeism, the cost of that, it doesn't add up.
So what happened was I ended up attending attending an event actually in Bicester a couple of years ago, and it made me actually just do some research around that. And it's interesting, you know, what you're talking about. When I started to look at some of the statistics around, you know, actually, and this is a couple of years ago, I think they reckoned it was something like 121 billion pounds worth of man hours were lost because of employees having financial worries or financial concerns. You know, 8% of employees you know, said that they use time in work to actually sort out their finances. 1 in 4 have sleepless nights worrying about money. You know, there's some really massive statistics around the financial impact. And actually, when the Financial Conduct Authority, the FCA, actually did some research on it, they actually went to different employees and they went to different businesses. And I can, you know, I can share some of this stuff with anyone that's interested in it. You can find it if you sort of look up some of the FCA stuff. But the overwhelming response was that actually from employees, if their employers gave them accessibility to advice at work, that actually they would want to take it. And, you know, excuse me, I've got cats screaming at the door. There we go. And so I think that's what then started to happen. And then I think I started to engage with a few business owners and started speaking to a few HR managers, you know, and actually if somebody comes into work and they've just been diagnosed with something horrible, cancer or something like that, and they're sat talking to their HR director, and all of a sudden there's the questions around why they never enrolled for the private medical cover that they were entitled to, or actually they're not sure whether they've got life cover outside of work, and if they have, they don't understand how it works. And all of a sudden those HR managers are almost trying to counsel people, and that's not actually, you know, what they're there for. And so what I did find was that actually starting to build a relationship with some of those business owners and HR managers, where actually some of their employees might have been in that situation, and they could deal with the work orientated stuff and the support that they could put in place in the workplace and how that might work. But actually a lot of the feedback I got when I sat down with people, and I'm sure you get this too, Lisa, was sometimes I'd just sit down and listen to people's situation for an hour, and then we'd have a follow-up meeting around, you know, actually having a look at what documents they'd got and what policies they'd got and how they worked and some changes that they could make. But actually I mean, they'd be virtual now, but the hugs that you'd get at the end of that meeting, just because people were getting things off their chest and they actually felt that they were speaking to somebody that really cared, was so absolutely so rewarding. I don't climb mountains or jump out of aeroplanes or anything like that, and I sort of saw a lot of that as a way of me actually being able to give back to people.
I think that counts volumes, and I think that's the part that's often missing in terms of just kind of joining the dots and saying, actually, you know, we know in our companies we've got X number of people who work here, and that means there'll be a certain percentage of those who have got financial worries, and therefore let's help by providing a connection to someone or somewhere that they can go and get the support easily, and just ask questions, just ask for advice, and whatever that form looks like. So it might be that they need a lot, or they might just want to kind of dip in and out, but just having access, very easy access to something that is supportive, and having someone that they can offload to if they want to, and they can get some answers if that's useful to them.
So one of the companies that I did some work with up north, actually, I got involved with them because actually they were looking to change their pension scheme. Obviously, I'm not licensed in that area now, but they were looking to change their pension scheme, and fundamentally their employees didn't trust the business. They thought that, you know, that somehow they were all going to be hoodwinked and so on. And clearly the HR team didn't have the skills to be talking to people about pensions. So we said that, you know, we went in, people that I was working with, and just offered them free financial health checks, because of my background, and, you know, qualified in mortgages, and I've dealt with pensions and life assurance and banking and all sorts of things. If someone wanted to sort of sit down with a GP, whilst I couldn't give advice in all of those areas, I could point them in the right direction. But the sort of things that came out of that were, someone whose mother was about to need to go into care and they needed signposting for some help. I had one person who was actually, and the business didn't know it, they were about to be made bankrupt the following week, and they were about to lose their house, and they didn't know how to go about anything, or what was really happening. And in that company, what happened after the financial clinics that we ran was that they then actually started to introduce, and it's a couple of years now, so hopefully many organizations have got this, but they started to introduce sort of a wellness program, and they had a sort of wellness Wednesday. And actually the difference that I found when I went back 6 months later was that when I went into their staff room, they had a dedicated table and a board. And what happened was that they then started to reach out to other professionals. So it was a manufacturing factory. It was a high proportion of male northern employees. So, they had people coming in, and they had somebody came in and gave a talk on prostate cancer. Now, the stereotypical people that were employed there would not have had that discussion.
No, exactly.
Day-to-day basis, without wishing to paint people with the same brush. But they'd have never talked about things like prostate cancer or breast cancer or checking yourself out or any of those sorts of things.
Well-being, feeling, worried.
No, absolutely. They had somebody, I think, from Slimming World or Weight Watchers, talking about healthy eating, and they had a dietitian that came in and talked about that 3 o'clock, dip that you get. But all of those things that really start to make a difference. They started to do that, and actually you could start to see that their employees were much more engaged, and actually the levels of absenteeism started to reduce.
Because it's a holistic approach, isn't it? And I think that's what people need to, rather than just looking at the tick box, the whole person, and that's what people need to start focusing on. I was curious to know, how have you seen things change in financial services that you think has actually impacted on people's well-being?
I probably pick out some of the things in the news, actually, when you scroll through your phone. I think I read something last week, I think it was on a BBC News website, and it was talking about the lack of cash, and perhaps with older people, actually the number of retail organizations that actually don't take cash at all, and some of the problems that creates. At Metro Bank, we do offer a cash only bank account. So if someone's had bad credit, they can come into Metro Bank. That's not all we do. We do some other great stuff as well. But actually people can get a bank account open. But actually, if you go into a lot of banks and you've had, and we will have people through this pandemic who will have businesses that just go under. There will be people who, in a year, 2 years time, will have bad credit histories just through the fate of circumstances. And so I think that, actually the inability to maybe open bank accounts, access to financial advice, I think with some of the changes that came on the back of 2008 and the introduction of fees for paying for advice, whilst all of that has been done with the best intention by the regulator, what it has done is disenfranchised actually some of the lower tier people that might need advice. So, if you've got a several £100,000 pension pot, for example, actually it's not a big deal for you to be paying for advice. And actually with many companies, the advice cost is covered within the fee. But actually people that have got really small or really, really modest things that they need to talk about, actually the cost of providing advice by many financial advice companies means that actually they're not interested, because actually they're commercial businesses.
So how do you think that's going to impact then on people's lives? That's a very isn't it?
I think that actually things like the state pension age increasing, people having to work to 67 and not planning for it. We saw, obviously we don't talk about it now, but I was observing before the pandemic that we've got in, that actually there was starting to be a decrease in longevity within the UK. So actually the mortality rate was actually, you know, people were starting to live less, whereas actually we'd reached a point where, you know, everyone was predicted that, oh, actually they'll all be living to 100 and so on. People will be working for longer, and I think that there will be more reliance on the state. I think, you know, the sad side of that in terms of, you know, how does that then spiral is actually, you know, whether people take matters into their own hands, where people have more mental health issues and so on. I think that the support that needs to be there around things like citizens advice, actually people being able to get help, or being directed to places that can help, you know, through employers. It's not that easy to just go to your doctor and actually say, I'm feeling really low and I need help these days, is it? You know,
so I can say, what help is there then? If people were kind of listening to you talking now, thinking, actually, yeah, I'm someone who wants to help myself, or
yep.
I'm a manager, I'm a leader in a company, and I know that actually my staff would benefit from access. What help is there?
So there's a few things. I think, first of all, actually, if you go on to, oh my goodness, what's the site? I think I was looking at it yesterday. It's on the FCA
Well, we can
website.
put the links, Lorna, at the end.
Yeah, there's a money, I can't remember what it's called, sorry. There's a particular site which is actually signposted to through the FCA paper that they did, and actually they have some really good brochures and leaflets that actually employers can download, which actually also allow you to share those with your employees. So if you wanted to do something in-house, actually you can start to look at what's available. Money advice service, that's what I was trying to think of. And there's some really good stuff within there that you can look at. You can work with banks such as Metro Bank. So we will come in and we will do talks under our sort of money zone education thing around actually how to manage your money. But there are also a lot of financial advice companies out there who will actually come into an organization and will run financial advice clinics for free. And I think that actually just, you know, reaching out to some of the people that you might know within financial services, or some of the, you know, actually, you know, I keep an eye on some of the stuff on LinkedIn, but actually just posting something on LinkedIn that you're after, you know, being connected with someone that might be able to help with your business. You know, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I know loads of people around the country that offer financial advice clinics to different businesses. And what they'd normally try and do, you know, I did it, and I linked up with a mortgage advisor, and I linked up with somebody that actually dealt with wills and so on. And we had 3 rooms in a corridor, and people could come and see any one of us about any of those things. And actually we did that at absolutely no cost to the business, because fundamentally, actually, if you're running a business, it's a really good way to get new clients. And it might be that you speak to 7 people in a day, and actually you give, you know, really good sound advice for free to five people. But actually there's every likelihood that you might get 1 or 2 new clients out of that may then recommend you to other people. So from a commercial point of view, it can work for people to come and do some sort of pro bono work. But you know, similarly, I think when you look, most of the banks now do offer education programs, and most of them will go into organizations. I think it's just trying to, you know, actually find that right link. But the other thing I have always tended to do is also direct people. If you're talking to individuals, you know, you can always direct them to the Citizens Advice Bureau, and the Citizens Advice Bureau will help them if there's a debt problem, actually start to reach out to the people that they've got problems with. But actually, if what they need is actually, you know, something with a more personal effect that's actually tailored to individuals, I think that's where, you know, where professionals come from. You know, in terms of, you know, I used to work with a St James's Place practice, and actually regard those really highly. I know a number of IFA firms, you know, around locally. There's one in Chipping Norton that I know have just been running some financial advice clinics in conjunction with another mortgage practice.
Or you've frozen there, Lorna. So I was going to, while you're unfreezing, I was just going to point out that we're going to put some of the resources up on the at the end of this video. So we'll put your link, Lorna, so that people can get in touch with you, so that you can signpost out to people who might be able to help, and also some of the websites that you've recommended today. And also we've got some additional websites that we can add, so people have got all the connections there that we can signpost people to. So I'm going to let Lorna unfreeze now by ending this session. So I would say thank you very much, Lorna. I'm not sure if you can still hear me. Thank you.